When I entered college, there were so many orgs to choose from, and I was able to join a number of them and eventually take on leadership roles. And now looking back, I find myself asking these questions. Did I take them because I wanted to gain experience or grow, or simply because my friends were there? Or did I take them because I knew it would have looked good on my resume?
There are two kinds of motivations, the extrinsic motivations and the intrinsic motivations. As leaders, it would be good to pay attention to our motivations, why we're even leading in the first place. Is resume one of them? Would that be enough? That will be our first episode of our three-part series, Beyond the Resume. I am JR.
And I'm Aeron, and this is Ain't Boss, the only leadership podcast for highly stressed out students.
Here we go.
All right, welcome back to Ain't Boss, the only leadership podcast for highly stressed out students. Glad to have you here with us, listening wherever you are to our podcast. My name is Aeron.
And I'm JR. I'm so pumped up for this episode. So we're just gonna jump right in.
Okay, so for today, JR, we actually are embarking on another special journey. Actually, this is the first episode of a three-part series we're calling Beyond the Resume. And in this series, we'll be talking about one of the most prevalent things, you can say, in the corporate and even in the student life, which is the resume.
Yeah, I think a lot of leaders would get into the position of leadership not realizing why they're there. They just know that it's going to be good for their resume. We're going to be tackling and developing that idea, whether there's a problem with that or not. But let's just talk about why it's actually the case and why people would even think that way.
That's right. Yeah. And what better way to build on this first episode of this series that we have than talking about the reasons behind why we actually lead and why we actually want to put this leadership experience in our resume. So this first episode is actually entitled, Why Do I Lead?
Mm-hmm. And we're going to be mainly talking about motivations and goals of our leadership.
All right, now we're talking about resumes. And actually, I see this quite often. It's very common in my day-to-day life as a student. I see my friends working with their resumes, and I myself, I'm no stranger to actually building my credentials in order to enhance my resume.
Yeah, you're nearing the end of your college career that you should be thinking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super fast. I can't believe just a couple of years ago, I was this clueless provinciano walking the steps of my building for the first time, excited. And now here I am actually dealing with these resumes, something that I didn't see coming when I was in high school.
But you gotta do that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's only natural for students, not only of my year where I'm near graduation, but also for those even just starting out their college life, to value what's in their resume, whether that be their credentials, whether that be the length of their resume, for two specific things. Yeah, and the first of these things, I think, is because the resume actually summarizes our competence as students and as leaders as well. So it's a good way to make a good first impression on our employers during our applications, whether it be in student organizations. You see the resume actually standing out and getting you across that first step of taking that role or that job that you desire. Yeah. And I see this a lot in being the motivating factor behind why so many of my colleagues and even myself want to have a presentable resume.
Right. I think because it's already established that people look for something in the resume, not only grades, but really some other things that would make them marketable or fit for the jobs that they're actually applying for. So I think it's pretty valid.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think you'd agree with me also on this second point on why it's natural to value or to put importance on our resumes. And that's actually because our resume speaks of our experience and our resilience as both a student and a leader. I was talking about earlier about the length of your resume, and while that seemed trivial to me at first, why would length be a factor in making a good resume, or why? Yeah. But I was able actually to listen to an HR of a big company, of an HR director of a big company here in the Philippines, and specifically in Metro Manila. And she was talking about students who've had not super stellar grades, so grades, definitely enough to pass and make a mark. But the thing that stood out and made her resume stand out amongst thousands of other applications was the amount of experience that it contained. And this speaks also, I think this is because she said that this speaks also of her experience, of her adaptability, and especially resilience when taking on different jobs. So I think that's one way of why employers would see experience and leadership in particular as a good benchmark of, saying what a good resume is.
When did you actually have that interview?
Oh, it was actually a part of a company mixer just a few weeks back, if I'm not mistaken, at this time of recording. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it's still the case in your situation or in your year among your batchmates, Aeron, because there seems to be a preoccupation with the resume, and that's why people would go into different places and different leadership positions because of that preoccupation. Sometimes it's healthy, but sometimes it's actually insane. Just we're always thinking about that, and that's driving major decisions in college. And you said something about this before, something about culture, corporate culture. Want to say something about that? Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely, JR. Just to say, I agree with you completely that it's still happening right now. And I guess even more, it's more prevalent right now that that resume mindset, that corporate culture that you were talking about. And just to explain what that is, in my context, in my present context, it's all about making a mark, making a big splash when you get out of college, or not even when you get out of college, when you start applying for these internships, when you start applying for these jobs. It's only natural for students to to make themselves look impressive, to make themselves look capable of doing that job, because as the HR interviewers, it's also valid for them to look at these things because they don't actually see you every day in college, and there's no other basis right now. So the basis that the corporate scheme or the college scheme has created is this resume. So students conform to this not just out of necessity, but also out of a want to further themselves and to seek more opportunities in the future.
Yeah, I think it's also changing some corporate settings, but I think it's still very much still in the culture that you ought to be rewarded for a good thing that you did. So consequently, there's always okay, if you did this, you're gonna be receive an incentive.
Yeah.
So I think that's also passed on to students when people are hiring. So say, do this so that you can actually have a nice resume, and because of that, you're gonna be incentivized. Does that make sense?
Of course, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And definitely, this is not an isolated case, and more so, it is not an unreasonable thing to do. As good resumes right now mean good job opportunities, and good resumes increase your probability of a good future, so to speak. But we must think also, if these resumes are at the center of our corporate culture, of our student life, there might be some instances where we only want to lead in the context of our podcast, where we only want to take on these leadership roles in order to just better our resume and nothing else. And we talked about the importance of leadership during the past few episodes. And so it comes to my mind, if we put too much reliance on this resume, on this corporate culture, will it be causing some problems for ourselves and for the people we lead moving forward?
Yes. I think it would be good now for us to actually think about, when we're leading, what really motivates me? What are my goals when I actually get into a position of leadership? And I think when we look at resume, that's going to fit into that realm of motivations and goals. So I think we should be just talking about that. All right. So when one takes on leadership position, one would have many goals. And I think there are varieties or reasons why you'd want to be in that position and so that you can achieve something, right?
Yeah.
But in psychology, there's a study in 2008 by Elliott and Murayama that talks about achievement goals. So achievement goals would be basically focusing on competence. So for many reasons, you probably would want to be like the president of an organization, mainly because your friends wanted you to be. But many leaders would actually also focus on competence. They would want to achieve something. So this is called achievement goals. And according to their study, there will be two types. Okay, so one would be performance goals and mastery goals. So performance goals would focus on demonstrating competence. So for example, like you'd like to achieve in an organization, if you're an org that would organize several events in a year, so you'd really want to hit the target of X number of events, of course with good quality, according to your standard, so on and so forth. Am I making sense? So this will really be more towards like key performance indicators.
I was actually gonna say that organizations usually focus on these KPIs, as we like to call them, the beloved KPIs, and we actually use that event in, event out as an indicator of whether we're doing well, whether you're not doing well.
Right.
But aside from specific events, KPIs are widely used in organizations, at least in my experience, to navigate or to gauge where the organization is going, not only per event but as a whole. So are we moving in the right direction? The KPIs say something about that. Was I right in
I
using
think
that?
they're really be more on the tangible measurement.
Yeah.
So that would be events or money raised, participants recruited, so on and so forth. The second one would be mastery goals. So they're going to be more focused on developing competence.
Yeah.
So for example, like you want to be good at speaking in front of people. So you're not necessarily be like counting how many people in the audience you've actually given a speech to, but it's really more of like, okay, you have a certain standard or a certain measure that's probably not quantifiable, but at least it's possible for you to know whether you're actually making a progress. So you're developing in that competence. Am I making sense?
It's and it's just interesting also because in organizations there are some workshops that you actually have to attend. Well, not necessarily mandated or like you're supposed to go there.
Extracurricular.
But we're recommended to go there in things such as Excel workshops, how to create pubs, things that we use in our everyday life and can help our work and can help enhance our skills. So organizations put a premium on that, and they actually put a lot of effort into making sure that their members gain those skills or at least improve them, experience some growth towards that aspect. And actually, I have a question towards that. We were talking about resumes in this context, and my question: how do we reconcile? Where do we see within those resumes mastery goals? Where do we see those performance goals? I think it can be quite confusing because a resume is one whole big thing.
Good question. I think that's why we're talking about the achievement goals, because this a leadership goal that would be highly linked to resume. So when people think about leadership and resume, they're mainly thinking about the achievement goals. As I've said, like you can't put in a resume like, oh, I was a leader because I want to please my friends who wanted me to run for a position. No, but I think that's very valuable if you're a president and you're friends with the people you're leading. I think we had a podcast about like what people look for in a leader is actually not just competence. So anyways, but I think it's good for us to pay attention to the achievement goals because that's the goal that would be highly linked to resumes. So the building up a perfect resume would probably fit into the performance goal. So like I want to be good at leading, or I want to have certain results in my leadership position so that I could really put it in my resume. On the other hand, people would not really notice this or pay attention too much about this, but what they actually put in their resume could actually fall under mastery goals. Nowadays, people or companies would look for like, okay, how do you translate certain things that you do in your organization that would actually reflect, again, your resilience and not only your competence? How you're able to cope with certain situations, address problems. I think that would fall under mastery goals. So, the question is, do we have a problem if we're just driven by resume in our leadership roles? Okay? So let's look at different motivations in our leadership or why we're even leading so that we can actually know whether there's like, it's a healthy way of thinking about our leadership position. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. So there's a classic way of dividing or categorizing motivations. So one would be extrinsic and then the intrinsic one. So extrinsic meaning like X, out. So that's what you see outside, factors outside you. Okay?
Yeah.
So that could be, and then there will be two divisions under that. The intrinsic one would be on the inside. So basically it comes from you. So some people would say it comes from your heart or your desires, whatever, but that's within you. All right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but I think many leaders would be motivated by those two types of motivation anyway. So we'll have both of them. Under extrinsic motivation, we'll have the positive reinforcement, or some people would say the carrots. So remember, like there's a reward, there's a incentive. Yeah. So the positive reinforcement would be coming in a form of job, cash incentive, or for students, I don't know, what would be the normal positive reinforcement?
Well, definitely it would be grades. It would be
Of course,
recognition
yes,
from
yeah.
your peers, or
Right, yeah.
recognition in terms of your organization, your status in the organization. Things such as those are definitely carrots to students like me.
Correct. So some of them might be very tangible, like grades, or some of them would be, praises or trust of their friends. Yes. And then the sticks naman, or the negative reinforcement would be more on the punishment or the demerits. So they're normally driven by what? Fear or failure. Of course, they don't want that.
Yeah.
So that would motivate them to actually be good leaders because they want to avoid them. So of course, like in a setting where in the corporate culture, of course you might lose your job, so on and so forth. Like so, student culture probably would be what?
FOMO, fear of missing out
Yeah.
on these opportunities. I think that's one concrete way why like students also want to gun for more positions, want to gun for
Yeah.
more work and more opportunities. And this is again no means wrong, but yeah, it's one of the motivators that drive us really to pursue that next step up in the corporate life or in the resume life.
Yeah. So that's extrinsic motivation. So basically, from the outside. So
Yeah.
there are factors that would motivate you to actually do or be a good leader. The intrinsic, on the other hand, I think I got this from the TED Talk of Daniel Pink. It talks about the puzzle of motivation. We're going to put it in the show notes. That there are three forces of motivation: the autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So remember, intrinsic motivation will be coming from you. So the autonomy would be more on, okay, I want to direct myself. Meaning like, for once, I'd like to also call the shots. Like if you've been like being told what to do, some of the motivation we have is like, oh, at least I'll make my own judgment here, or, Am I making sense?
take control. Take control. Experience being in that position. I want to be a leader too.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's very much connected, like especially for those people who are growing up, like college people, adulting. It's good. I think it's very much more prominent. Like, oh, I'm becoming my own man or my own woman.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
Finding that
basically that's it.
identity. Yeah, finding that
Correct.
leadership identity. What can I do? What am I capable of? Yeah,
Correct.
definitely.
And
makes
what's
sense.
my place? Yeah, I have my own contribution also to this team, but also to the world. Like I got something
Yeah.
to offer as well. So I think that's autonomy. The other one would be mastery. So the motivation to actually get better at things. So you're not so much concerned whether like you're first place or not, but you're much more concerned that you're enjoying to actually be good at something. So I have a friend who really learned how to bake bread.
Wow.
And I mean, this guy could be very competitive and say like, "Oh, I want to have the best bread out there in the world." But as I see him also, like he's my housemate, it's actually quite fascinating that he just enjoys getting better at it. And he, like the wonder of like, "Oh, I could do this or I could do that." It's amazing. So some leaders would have that also, that kind of motivation in their organization.
Yeah, and especially you mentioned baking bread. That's a skill that takes so much time
Yeah,
to master. It's an
definitely.
artisanal skill.
So that would be the mastery. Okay. So
Yeah.
the third one would be purpose. So the purpose motivation, it's intrinsic, basically your perception of why it's a good thing.
Okay.
So like why is this organization important? And why would the things that I would do would matter? And that would fall under the purpose intrinsic motivation.
Okay.
So, for example, in our organization, when I was a student, I had an opportunity also to mentor younger students. Now I'm mentoring a lot of you guys, but I had an opportunity when I was in fourth year to start also mentoring younger students. And I just felt that it was very important for me to help them adjust in college life. It was important for me to see them also flourish. And whether I could be the best mentor or not, although I'm very competitive, of course I wanted to be the best mentor.
Of course.
but
Mastery.
But I just know that it's a very important role that I have in my friend's life. So that I think it would be good for us to recognize now, okay, so why would our organization be important as well?
Yeah.
So for some people, like why would this event be important? So some people it's a very big deal for them. Like I really believe in this. For some people, not so much.
Yeah.
So for most people who would think about like, okay, this is good for my resume, they're thinking more about like, okay, achievement goals. But they're also motivated by many things. So some people might say like, oh, that's wrong. You're only like motivated by resume. But some people might actually be motivated by other things with the thought of resume, but they're coming from different places. So it's hard to actually make a judgment on that person's motivation, whether it's wrong or not. So I think we're going to discuss that later on in the next episode. Certain pitfalls naman if they actually just focus on just particular motivation.
So just to recap, if I'm getting this right, so for extrinsic motivation, we have the carrots and the sticks, or positive and negative reinforcement,
Correct, yes.
external reinforcement at that. And then we have autonomy, we have mastery, and we have purpose for intrinsic motivation. Am I right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So, and those motivations would affect the achievement goals, but all the other goals that a leader would have while they're in a leadership position.
All right.
Or whether they're in an organization or not, like say in a certain group work or in a competition, team competition, there will be certain elements of the motivation at play also there. So, but for this particular conversation about like resume and
Resumes,
leadership.
yeah.
Yeah, we're really like focusing on the achievement goals. Yeah.
Great.
It's important for us now to actually identify. So, what would really motivate me as a leader? So, okay, I'm thinking about a resume. That's my entry point of taking the lead. Of course, not everybody who's in a leadership position will normally think about resume right away. But I think that's common for many people. So, and it's okay. But it's important for us. Okay, what motivates me in my leadership position? It's always good for us to be aware of our motivations. I think self-awareness is one facet that we'd always want to talk about as leaders. So in this case, we want to know our motivations. So let's take some tests, okay?
Wow.
So I'm gonna ask you to take some tests. So
I hope this
got a
isn't too hard.
Okay, we got a silly test here and a serious one. So brace yourself.
All right. Here we go.
All right. So as I've said, I want you to take this silly test just
Okay.
for a sample. So I'm not gonna share anymore where I got this, but some questions I think that some questions that are worth pondering on. Okay. So this will give the people who are listening to us some examples of how do motivations would affect us. Okay.
All right.
All right. So one
So-
silly question.
I'll be your guinea pig
So-
for this one.
Right. Yes. Okay. You interview for the job of your dreams, and
Wow.
afterwards they tell you you're in, but the money is terrible, and so are your hours. Okay. So you one. Take the job. At least you'll be happy doing what you love. Option 2. Haggle over the salary, and if they won't budge, keep on looking. 3. Probably didn't show up for the interview. Option 4. Dance around a little and then accidentally puke on the interviewer because you are still hungover from the night before. What's
Alright.
your answer?
Okay. All right. That's a pretty silly question, but I believe I can have some answers towards that also.
All right.
First and foremost, I find this question really relevant. Just recently, we've been seeing at the time of recording, we've been seeing lots of discussions about haggling for wages. I think there was
Right.
this one recent graduate who went viral on Twitter because of this. But actually, in light of that, I would go for the second option and haggle and negotiate. And if it doesn't, the recruiter doesn't budge, I'd look for, I'd keep looking for other jobs. And
Right.
maybe it's just because of my practicality as well as a person. I look for the best compromise.
You don't have to explain, Aeron. It's okay.
Yeah, but definitely I would choose the second option.
Okay.
Knowing myself.
All right. I think I will also go for that option. Okay. Next question. This is one of the busiest weeks of your life. You have tons of homework assignments, and some are more important than others. Included is a major paper worth 25% of your grade, and a relatively fun assignment for a class you enjoy, but is only worth a small percentage. You, option 1, spend all your time making sure the paper is perfect, meaning the 25%. Option 2, start working on the fun project to get your creativity flowing for when you have to mema or work your way around in the paper and just say things. You're able to do that. Option 3, stay up all night trying to do both. Or option 4, watch Desperate Housewives for inspiration.
Okay, so I'm gonna throw a question back at you. What episode
Okay,
of Desperate Housewives are you saying? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
What even that is? I think it's so dated.
All right, I
Do
probably
you even
go.
know this? Do you know the show?
I've seen snippets on Facebook, definitely
Okay,
here and
I
there.
think that's my time. That's my
Yeah.
my era.
I guess I'm too young for that, I guess. I'm just kidding. I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
maybe.
But I definitely go for the third option. I don't want to leave anything to waste, especially I'm assuming this is towards the end of, a semester. So I definitely go for both.
Right. I'm
Yeah.
actually torn between, to be honest, like the second or the third. So like I'll work on the fun project so that I'll have the creativity flowing. But I mean, I'm not a student anymore. I don't know
Yeah.
what I'd feel.
How many years
Okay,
removed? Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
let's not talk about that. Okay, I'm kidding. Anyways, okay, those are silly questions, but I think it gives us an indication of what our motivations are. And you'll see in the choices which would fall under actually extrinsic motivation and the intrinsic motivation. Again, we're
Right.
not saying that one is better than the other. Later on, again, as I've said, we're going to be talking about that. But it's important for us to really be real, to get to know ourselves and what drives us. Okay?
Yeah.
So here's the real test. So I got this test from the study of Cliff Cody in 2014. So we'll just put it in the show notes. But this one is a motivation connected to the task. But I'd say we can even put this in the context of like, a leadership
Okay.
role or position. Okay? So try to answer this. You'll just say agree or disagree, continuum, or some, and then 1 to 5 or 5 to 1. Okay?
Okay.
Got it? All right. So
So-
I'll just give the instruction anyway, and then
Sure,
just put
sure.
the number. All right. So let's
All right.
start.
Let's do this.
All right. So let's go to first question. Okay?
Let's do this.
All right. I couldn't go more than one day without doing this task. I couldn't go more than one day without doing this task. Agree would be 1, disagree would be 5. Again, the agree would be 1, disagree 5. So from 1 to 3, 4, 5, just assign
All
a
right.
number.
All right.
That
I think I
describes
got
it,
that.
okay?
I think I got that. Okay.
All right. So second, I usually think about what others will say about my results. So agree would be 5 this time, and then disagree would be 1. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So
Okay.
you think about what others will say about your results. Okay. Third question. I tend to lose track of time when performing this task. I tend to lose track of time when performing this task. Now, agree would be 1, disagree would be 5. So 1,
Okay.
2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Fourth, I usually become stressed and anxious when doing this task. Usually become stressed and anxious. Okay. So this time, agree would be 5, disagree would be 1. So 5, 4, 3, 2. All right.
Yeah.
Are you able to follow?
Yeah, I think I'm able to follow.
Cool. Next, I would wake up earlier just to do
Ah.
this task.
Yeah.
I would wake up earlier just to do this task. Agree would be 1, 5 would be disagree. Okay, so
As
1, 2, 3,
a
4, 5.
morning person, I think I know what my answer is already.
You don't have to. You don't have to share so much about.
Yeah,
this.
of course, yeah.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Let's move on.
All right. Let's move on. Next question. I look forward to compliments after I complete this task. I look forward to compliments after I complete this task. Agree would be 5, and then disagree would be 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. If I was the last person on earth, I would never do this task again. If I was the last person on earth, I would never do this task again. Agree 5, disagree 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Same as last question. Agree as
Correct.
5.
Correct.
Disagree.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think
We're
this is a
good.
different pattern. Yeah.
Okay, we're good.
Next. I don't really care what others will think about my results. I don't really care what others will think about my results. So agree now would be 1, disagree would be 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
All right.
All right.
I think we can proceed.
Okay. I enjoy the challenge that comes with this task. I enjoy the challenge that comes with this task. Agree would be 1, 5 would be disagree. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
All right. Next, I love the feeling of getting better at this task. I love the feeling of getting better at this task. Agree would be, again, 1. Disagree would be 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Second to the last. I hope doing this task makes other people respect me. I hope doing this task makes other people respect me. So agree would be 5, disagree would be 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay. I'm just adding it as we go.
Yes.
Go ahead.
And then last question would be, I rarely look forward to doing this task. I really look forward to doing this task. Agree would be 5, disagree would be 1. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay? And I hope the people who are listening, they're also answering this. And go ahead and add up your scores.
Okay, give me some time.
Okay.
Around 10 seconds.
All right.
To get them. Make it sure.
All right. You're good at math. I think you should be able to do it pretty quickly.
I think I followed pretty well.
All right. So what's your score? What do you have?
So I actually came up with a total score of 31.
31. Okay.
Yeah.
So what this tells you is if your score is below 36 points, you are higher on intrinsic motivation. If you are more than 36 points, you are higher on extrinsic motivation. Okay. What does that tell you? You're either higher on extrinsic or you're higher in intrinsic motivation. Is it a wrong thing? Is it a good thing? We don't really want to put judgment on that. But I think for every leader out there, it would be good for us to really know our core motivations. Why are you leading in the first place? And if it's just about resume, it's important for you to accept that. And what about resume that actually drives you and motivates you to actually take on leadership position? I think at the end point is being aware of our motivations would be very, very key so that we can actually lead well.
And actually, that's the first step towards really becoming better, not only as a leader, but as a person as a whole. And I'd just like to put emphasis on what JR asked you guys or our audience. Like, what motivations actually drive your leadership? What motivations drive my leadership? I think it's important to really ask that question. And one way we can do that is actually just to take a bit of time to internalize why we're actually watching this podcast in the first place. It could be because you're interested.
Or listening to the podcast,
It could be either you're interested to really learn the ropes, go from the ground up and grow as a leader. It can be because you think you're supposed to listen to this. It's just within you and you have that gut feel. I have to listen to this in order to become better. It could be that. Or it could also be.
Or maybe you think that you're required or you're being forced to listen to this,
Or it could be that you want to support the people behind this podcast, JR and I, our marketing team, our friends behind everything, the great team behind AAB, Ain't a Boss. Or it's just even because of the mundane thing that you have nothing else to do and you just want to listen in, just browse through your Spotify account or YouTube account and just saw this podcast. So whatever those reasons are, again, we don't want to put any bias on which one's good, which one's bad, but things like this, things like internalizing and understanding our motivations behind certain things can really help us in the long run, especially in this context. We're talking about big things such as resume and leadership, and it's always nice to internalize and become more aware of the reasons why we're actually doing this in the first place. That makes sense, JR. Yeah.
For sure. And it would be good for us to start looking at our leadership as we're motivated by many things. Resume is just one of them.
Indeed.
And how are we going to be able to navigate this crazy world of leadership? It would be good for us to pay attention to our motivations.
Great. I enjoyed answering those questions, especially the silly ones, but also the serious ones.
I'm going to give you more of the questions, the silly ones, but I don't think I should be sharing it here anymore.
All right. I'll take note of that.
There you go. We just talked about different motivations that drive our leadership and different goals that propel us to lead well. Basically, we just wanted to answer the question, why do I even lead? This is the first episode of the three-part series, Beyond the Resume. In the end of the series, we're gonna have a Q&A episode and we welcome all your questions. We'll try to respond to them. So if you have questions, fill in the form that will be shown on the description of this episode. So fire away.
Yeah, so make sure to watch out for our future episodes. And if you do want to follow this amazing Beyond the Resume series, make sure to follow us on Spotify, on YouTube, or wherever you may get your podcast. Again, this has been Aeron, the only leadership podcast for highly stressed out students.